it's me, Channel Dog. How are you doing? I, for one, am pretty dang thrilled. I just finished watching Daredevil Born Again Season 2. And really, I have to talk about this. So let's have a little chat about both seasons of Daredevil Born Again, kind of the roots of the show, what Daredevil Born Again Season 2 had to build atop, and we'll have a great time. But confession, before I get on to talking about Daredevil Born Again Season 2, I do still need to see Daredevil Season 2 and Season 3 of the original Netflix run, which I'm definitely going to see, and hey, maybe we can make videos on that too. But the reason why I've only seen Season 1 of Daredevil was because at the time Daredevil dropped, I wasn't really a believer at all in superhero television. Back then, I was all about budget, and I'm just like, no. Looking back, no. A lot of time has passed since then. My housemates wanted to do a rewatch of the original Netflix Daredevil before watching Daredevil Born Again. And I wanted to get in on this so I could get all caught up to speed. But here's the thing. Life really do get in the way. We only really got the time to watch Season 1, and I wasn't going to make my housemates wait to see the new season of Daredevil until I'm caught up. And I wasn't going to say no to the chance at sharing in the experience of watching it for the first time together. So my hands were tied, and as it stood, it did a really good job at feeling like a follow-up to the original Daredevil season, but also feeling kind of self-contained, with like the death of Foggy at the start. They immediately established the old dynamic that they were all friends with their warmth of their conversation and their little hangout, and then when Foggy gets shot, that's just kind of where we're coming into like the born again of it all. This is the new kind of established order of the show. And when it came to the reintroduction of characters like Bullseye and Frank Castle, I am already aware of the significance of these characters, but the show also did a good job at reintroducing them as well. There was never really a point where I felt lost. Could some moments have maybe hit harder if I had seen Daredevil Season 2 and 3? I don't doubt it. Is Season 3 not all about Bullseye and kind of his origins? And when I do get around to watching Season 2 and 3 of Daredevil and the other Defenders universe stuff, yeah, I already have some idea of who lives and who dies. But that's just the price I pay for being a non-believer when I was a stupid teenager. And that is my problem, not yours. All I'm saying is, take my opinion here for what it is. I want to be upfront about that because I have no interest in being a poser, even if I could totally fool you guys. Someday I should make a video about something I know absolutely nothing about. Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again was clearly a compromised production. There were two production teams, the first of which wanted to treat the show as a full reboot of Daredevil, just with Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio back in their roles. They were even going to recast Vanessa. Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio allegedly spoke to Kevin Feige to get the show back on track, and it was reworked with a new production team into more of a Daredevil Season 4. Emphasis on reworked, they could not rebuild this thing entirely from the ground up. And yeah, you can kind of feel that. Daredevil Born Again Season 1 felt like it was kind of living with its own consequences. The original direction of Daredevil Born Again was that it was going to be more of a courtroom procedural, and a large chunk of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 is taken up by courtroom procedural stuff. But new material was added to account for Foggy and Karen's absence, why it spends more time as a courtroom procedural, and that is the death of Foggy. Matt Murdock has given up on Faith and given up on Daredevil. None of that was originally going to have a structure. It was just going to be treated as the status quo as opposed to earning it. I just can't imagine that working. But what I can very easily imagine is people being really pissed off about that. And you could tell that elements like White Tiger and Muse were more made for that kind of episodic format that the original version of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 was going to have. And then everything with Wilson Fisk's anti-vigilante task force was added in the revamp as well, serving as kind of a connective tissue, the war on vigilantes. So for that original version of the show, Fisk's anti-vigilante policy would be more in the background, rather than being the violent ice allegory that we ended up getting. As for that original version, so it would just be Daredevil minus everything that made Daredevil special. You don't need to have watched all 3 seasons of the Netflix show to understand that. So Born Again Season 1 is kind of a salvage job, and you can definitely feel the seam lines in there. However, I have to say the production team did such a wonderful job at creating new character-driven contexts for these events to happen in the show, and working them into a greater story. Daredevil Born Again still serves as a massive shake-up to the status quo of the Daredevil TV series, but with the revelation that Vanessa Fisk had Foggy killed by Bullseye, we earned that change. I will say I thought the overall look of the show was a bit of a downgrade from what I saw in season 1 and what I've seen in clips of season 2 and 3. It was still good, don't get me wrong, a cut above a lot of what Marvel have put out in the past. They did some really cool things with the lighting, and then there's the whole BB report stuff, with BB Urich seeking to investigate Wilson Fisk as a form of justice for her uncle Ben Urich, who was choked to death by Kingpin in season 1 of the original show. But also BB's form of journalism allows for some really strong world building with some really fun filmmaking flourishes, as this has kind of a homemade aesthetic to it. But the filmmaking just doesn't quite recapture that grime of the original show, and that makes sense given that it no longer takes place in Hell's Kitchen either. Matt Murdock now lives in a swanky new flat. The look that Daredevil Born Again has is appropriate, it just doesn't match the ingenuity of what the Netflix Daredevil team managed to accomplish with a smaller budget. Smaller budgets are commonly where your best decisions get made. They couldn't always blast every scene they had with lighting, so they had to be sparing, and you got a lot of yellows and blues. And Daredevil Born Again Season 1 is just that bit less intense. All that said, I think if you were to watch Daredevil Born Again with no knowledge of the creative revamp that happened early in production, you wouldn't necessarily notice this. By all definitions, this is Frankenstein monster filmmaking, but this might be one of the most graceful Frankenstein monster projects I've seen. The end result is, yeah, I maybe wish I could have seen a bit more of Daredevil. I do miss Foggy and Karen. I do miss the aesthetics of the previous version. And there is that one episode that kind of sucks butts. Yeah, I agree with Charlie Cox in that the bank robbery episode was incredibly cliched. It didn't really feel like there was any new layer to make this like a Daredevil version of a bank robbery to justify its own episode. The criminals were cartoonish Irish stereotypes, and too few people realized that the Irish were a marginalized group. You won't hear it in history classes, just ask your Irish friends about it, I guess. The cameo from Kamala Khan's dad also felt very forced, and a Funko Pop appearance. Yeah, this version of the show was definitely aiming to be a bit more mainstream. I actually kind of like Funko Pops, but I don't think they need to be in the shows. But if that's all I can really say about a production that went through this much trouble, hats off to them, they did good. Building off of the not-so-subtle ICE allegories within the anti-vigilante task force, this TV show also managed to factor in the appropriation of the Punisher logo in the real world by dirty cops and military personnel, who effectively view themselves as judge, jury, and executioner. In the White Tiger storyline, the police move in on White Tiger, and one of the cops is struck by a train in the process, and then the cops use White Tiger as kind of an scapegoat, putting him on trial as a cop killer. Then when Matt Murdock successfully clears his name in a court of law, feeling dissatisfied, Sergeant of the police force Cole North dons a Punisher disguise and executes White Tiger in the street. These dirty cops then go on to join Kingpin's task force, with Kingpin effectively weaponizing New York's dirty cops as a fascist regime, as they threaten innocents, storm their homes all in search of the vigilantes. And you might notice that the anti-vigilante task force uniforms have kind of a Punisher logo built into the armor. And this is a big part of what Daredevil Born Again is all about. That is the prevailing narrative of the show. Political figures gaining too much power, overreach of power, with vigilantes like White Tiger, who are genuinely good people, being killed by the system that is supposed to protect them. And then you've also got Muse, who factors into this as he is fuel for Wilson Fisk's campaign. Politicians often want the public to fear whoever their chosen scapegoat is, and in this instance, it's vigilantes. I remember saying after watching Captain America Brave New World, never expect a Brave New anything from the mouse, which is why I was genuinely in disbelief that Disney could release something like this. The real-world allegories for corrupt police officers, ICE, and the Western world's very slippery slope that could potentially lead to fascism are all present in Daredevil Born Again, and it actually has something to say about it. So, with what a good job they did at recontextualizing and making Daredevil Born Again Season 1 work, I was hotly anticipating Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I didn't really have any concern for, the foundations they're building off of. Season 1, very strong. but it was a compromised project, so it was just very exciting to see what they could build from the ground up off of these foundations. The first thing that immediately leapt out to me was the filmmaking of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. The way the show looked, because Daredevil Born Again is clearly on a much higher budget than the original show was. With that often comes less creative decision making, and I think you could definitely feel a little pinch of that in Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. Season 2 is a completely different story altogether. Yes, it is clearly higher budget. The destruction of Fisk's cargo ship, the Northern Star, the action sequences feel a lot bigger. We get another one-shot fight, and this one-shot fight is really cool. But I also love, like, the lens choices they had this season. We're seeing a lot more wide angles. You could see a little bit of chromatic aberration as well in there, usually around the edges of the subject or more around the edges of the shot. The visuals are a lot grungier again. Because of martial law in effect in New York City, Matt Murdock and Karen Page are living above an Indian restaurant, hiding out in more of a spare space situation, and we see when they build their underground resistance, they're operating in safe houses in Hell's Kitchen. So the show definitely has more of that aura back. We've got the bright, expressive lighting back in tow as well. The BB Report videos are more unhinged than ever before, with a very entertaining segment of her masquerading around in this latex kingpin mask. And really, just when I thought I couldn't get more impressed with the filmmaking of this season, it just kept getting better. You've got the flashbacks in episode 5. These take place in season 1 time, and they've actually managed to make it look like Daredevil season 1, complete with the change in aspect ratio, that more shadowy, more noisy look. One of my housemates said he kind of wished the whole show could have looked like that, but at the same time, I think the look that they've got down for Born Again season 2, beyond these flashbacks, fits the scale of this version of the show beautifully. This is New York City under the siege of Kingpin. You want it to kind of feel big and grandiose, but it still brings that aura of Daredevil with it, which was just a little bit more lacking in season 1. But then in the finale, there's this moment with Daredevil, the Daredevil protesters, and Mayor Fisk clashing in the court of law, and it looks like something straight out of a Renaissance painting. Some of the best shots in the MCU are coming from this show. It looks fantastic. That was the first thing that really leapt out to me. Season 2 pays off on a lot of the story arcs from Season 1, both pre-vamp and revamp. White Tiger's little niece joins the Resistance. Her mother is taken in by the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, all because she confronted some teenagers that were shoplifting. Dr. Heather Glenn, a brief romantic interest for Matt Murdock in Season 1 of Born Again, who also served as Muse's psychiatrist, later attacked by Muse and rescued by Daredevil. In Season 2, she's battling those inner demons. She herself is becoming the next Muse. But I think they're reserving more of her stuff for Season 3. But then perhaps best of all is Dex Poindexter, aka Bullseye. After he did his job for Vanessa Fisk in killing Foggy, the Fisks tried to have him killed in prison, and because of that, he decides he wants to balance the scales for what he's suffered. Poindexter is one of the best things about this show. He is so unhinged, so bizarrely charismatic, and so challenging to Matt and Karen. He's a scene stealer. He has this brilliant waking up montage where he's like saying hello to his neighbor before going into a diner and shooting all of the task force agents that he possibly can. As far as he's concerned, if Mayor Fisk is hunting vigilantes, if he too is being hunted, he must therefore be kind of a hero. It's kind of like take the guy who killed Foggy and ruined the lives of Matt Murdock and Karen Page, and have him join their resistance. Shenanigans really do ensue, but it also has the very serious theme of what Foggy would have wanted, what kind of person Foggy was. And this is where Foggy's presence in the series is felt the most. So as Mayor of New York, Wilson Fisk takes part in a public boxing match, which goes about as you'd expect. Kingpin's a fucking monster. By stepping out into the public spotlight, this could snuff out Bullseye. Lo and behold, it does. But the assassination attempt leads to Vanessa Fisk getting deathly injured. The task force crack down on Poindexter, and so Daredevil goes in to help and protect him, even though he absolutely loathes him. And it's here where we get those flashbacks, and what those flashbacks show us is an instance where Foggy is really trying to de-escalate the consequences for a client, while Matt Murdock is a bit more aloof about it. What happens, happens. This episode puts a spotlight on Foggy's compassion, and there's a moment where Matt has the perfect excuse to bail on Poindexter, and damn nearly does. But in the end, Foggy's values prevail, and Fisk saves him. He chooses mercy. Then, in that same episode, you've got Wilson Fisk at the bedside of Vanessa Fisk, and it's unclear whether or not she's ever going to make it. And there's this brilliant moment where she reawakens, and it's like she and Wilson, they're reunited. He's relieved as he thought he'd never see her again, but there's that realization that she's got severe brain damage as her memory is just all over the place. She can't remember the last thing she said, and then she dies from an aneurysm. In the moment where she first woke up and Wilson had not realized that Vanessa's memory was gone, you could see just how much this mattered to Wilson, in that, like, even his gravelly voice changes to a more soft-spoken one. You see the sheer depth of his vulnerability, and then she's slowly snatched away from him once more. You almost feel kind of bad for him, but then you remember he's Kingpin. He's like one of the few truly irredeemable villains of the Marvel Universe. Another story paid off from Season 1 is the story of Daniel Blake, who in Season 1 was kind of a kiss-ass aide to Wilson Fisk, and he also has a crush on Bibi Urich, which Bibi Urich takes advantage of, using their sort of kinship as a means to manipulate him into leaking sensitive information about Fisk in her new broadcast section called City Without Fear. But Wesley 2, aka Buck, which is the funniest name for a British man, Kingpin's right-hand man if you will, he's on to Daniel. He knows that information is being leaked and wants Daniel to bring Bibi into him. After a great deal of struggling, Daniel decides to sacrifice himself to save Bibi. He goes back to Buck empty-handed, and it costs him his life. What could have been a simple Gen Z MAGA head stand-in actually ended up being a character with a little depth. The stakes ramp up massively when Karen Page is taken prisoner of the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, as she was instrumental to the sinking of the Northern Star, and she's a known ally of Daredevil. And for her trial, Matt Murdock steps back out into the public eye to represent her against Mayor Fisk. So it is the ultimate fight for their lives against Wilson Fisk in court. And we see Fisk quietly threatening Matt. He knows he's Daredevil, and he could end this entire thing. So what does Matt do? Turns around and tells the court that he is Daredevil and wins the case. And Kingpin has the crash out of the century, as he just demolishes his way through all these Daredevil outfit-clad protesters. I saw him snap one of their backs against like a pillar. It's really gory, and it's really violent. So while Matt Murdock willingly unmasked himself in the courtroom, Kingpin also unmasks his true self. He's not Mayor Fisk here, he's Kingpin. It is extremely cathartic to see Kingpin unmasked like this. It's all out in the open now. He's a maniac, he's a thug. And just when it looks like the civilians of New York are all but ready to kill Mayor Fisk, Daredevil himself steps in and chooses mercy, pleading with Fisk to take the exile deal. And that there is how Foggy remains present in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. His unwavering and sometimes incredibly unsatisfying mercy. Because I'm going to be honest there was a part of me that did want to see Kingpin get stamped to death there. The shot where Fisk is throwing the protesters off of the balcony looks like a piece of Renaissance-era artwork. This show just looks that good. There was a part of me going, Matt, what are you doing when he stepped in? But Daredevil is a merciful guy, bound by faith and bound by love for his friend. And so Fisk has to renounce his US citizenship and live out the rest of his days isolated on an island where he's all alone. All of his wealth and assets now frozen, because they do show him at the seaside. I'm like, oh, that looks kind of nice, actually. Oh man, I feel like he was rewarded. But this is a man who, to him, power was everything. And he's now living his life as a completely irrelevant person living far off the grid, and this whole crusade cost him Vanessa. And that might just be far more torturous for him than any jail term might have been. So there's kind of a little justice going on here. I think Daredevil Born Again Season 2 might just be one of the best things that Marvel have ever put out in the Disney era. Season 1 of the original show is actually up there too. Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is the boiling point of all of these insane status quo changes that we saw in Daredevil Born Again Season 1, with a newfound sense of confidence in the entire production. It's tighter, it looks better, the music is actually very consistent across both seasons and was always very good. I especially like that new motif, which is kind of the Daredevil Born Again theme, while they have retained the original Daredevil theme. Also the suit. The suit in Season 1 was okay. I could do without the washboard lining on the abs. And yeah, it could do with a Daredevil logo on the chest. But I did think it was an improvement on the Netflix armored suit. My favorite suit is still his black cloth disguise, especially when it has the hand wraps. That said, I think the best version of the Daredevil armored suit is the one seen in Season 2 of Daredevil Born Again. Because he's operating undercover, he's painted that previous suit black. And Daredevil just has so much aura when he's wearing black, but he does have the red Daredevil logo on the chest this time, making this the most complete looking Daredevil suit we've ever had. But I mean, if you can't decide between the red suit and the black suit, well, you get a little hybrid about halfway into the season as the black paint starts to chip off of that red suit. And it looks fucking raw. But the final thing I just want to touch on is the thematic relationship between Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again and Season 2. Season 1 being Fisk's Fear campaign. Fear the vigilantes, support Fisk, but Season 2 introduces us to the city without fear, the city that is willing to fight back, sending a message to those who overextend their power that they must fear their subjects. What a tenacious 2 seasons this was. And then as far as other character appearances as well, Punisher doesn't make a return in Season 2, but we do get Jessica Jones joining the Resistance. And she was a badass. We even got to see Luke Cage at the very end of her story. I gotta say, I'm really excited for this new direction of street-level MCU TV show. But before that, I'm gonna catch up on what I've missed. Daredevil Born Again, Season 2, absolutely phenomenal. Season 1 is really strong too. But with Season 2, they just knew what they were doing and they locked in. It's brilliant. What do you think of Daredevil Born Again so far? Comment below, discuss. What is your favorite Marvel TV show? If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like. If you didn't like it, be sure to leave a dislike. Hype the video, apparently that's a big help. Or don't, you don't have to do any of this. I'm not the boss of you. And now, a very special shout out for the patrons in the $5 and above tier. They are Manauza KB, Twilord Biotin, Serious Skeptic, and Mr. SP. KO Bennett, if you read this, you're a pup again. No, I'm not. Dare Denny, Sad Goku, Ghostly Phantom, Xander Wolf, Channel Pup, just an evil robot clone discarding. Fuck! You know, I'm just gonna call you Channel Pup from now on. Council of Geeks, SSS06, Carl X, RT0, Marv Animation, Grant Allen, Josh Strider, Silver, Ben Raven, Basic Content, Gideon Wells, Press Player Jason, Joseph Tribble, and Cho Henshin. Thank you folks so much for your generosity. It really does mean the world to me. And as for the rest of you watching, my channel is a buffet. Go grab yourself a plate. Peace.